Mississippi House of Representatives is now in session. Please let the House come to order. Please stand as we're led in prayer today by the gentleman from Tallahatchie. Remain standing thereafter for the pledge.
Mr. Speaker, ladies and gentlemen, on this day, today is Holocaust Remembrance Day, the 71st anniversary of the liberation of Auschwitz concentration camp. And we remember that because 1.1 million Jews and others died there. 6 million Jews in all died in the Holocaust. Also, before I pray, let us recall that there were Gentiles like us that died in this Holocaust too. One, Father Maximilian Kolbe, who was canonized by Pope John Paul. There was one escapee from Auschwitz. When the Nazis, when one escaped, they put 10 to death, and they put them in a room, gave them no food, no water, nothing till they died. Father Kolbe knew that one had children, young man had children. He gave up. He said, I want to take that man's place. So he did take his place. And that man lived and had children of his own. He was canonized by Pope John Paul in 1982. Millions of people all over the world are remembering this day today, and I want to share with you a prayer that is all over the world today for this, and let it be our prayer and a remembrance that we should never forget. Dear Lord, God and Father, we remember before you all those who bear the inner and outer scars of the Holocaust and of the subsequent acts of genocide. Let them not be overwhelmed by the horrors that engulf them. Be close to them. Help them to see that you suffer with those who suffer, and that no wickedness can ever extinguish your love, which is infinite. Restrain those who are filled with hatred and use violence to pursue their ends. Change their hearts. May remembrance make us alert to the reality of evil and its deceptive allure. Help us to recognize our own capacity for evil and allow your Spirit to purge it from our beings. Help us to stand up against evil and oppression, even if that means we have to suffer ourselves. Enable us to defend those who are not strong enough to defend themselves, and be ready to bring the light of your truth into dark areas of human experience. Deepen our respect for everything you have made, and help us to share in securing the maximum good of every person who is alive in your world. We ask this in the name of He who was and is and ever shall be, the Master of the universe. Amen. Pledge allegiance. The United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Good job. Thank you, sir. Appreciate it. Open the machine, Madam Clerk. Has everyone voted? Has everyone voted? Closed machine, Madam Clerk.
There's a quorum present, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Mr. Clerk. We'll have the reading of the journal. Gentleman Rankin moves we dispense with the reading of the journal. All in favor say aye. Opposed, nay. Ayes have it. Report of select committees.
We have none, Mr. Speaker.
Report of standing committees.
We have reports on the counter, Mr. Speaker.
Introductions of bills and constitutional amendments. Gentleman from Marion, Mr. Morgan.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I ask unanimous consent to dispense with the reading of the introductions.
Is there objection? Hearing none, we will do that. Resolutions, petitions, memorials, and other papers.
We have none, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Mr. Clerk. At this time, we will have the introductions of guests and visitors. Gentleman from DeSoto, Mr. Hopkins.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like for everyone to help welcome some of our DeSoto Countyans that are down for the Americans for Prosperity Day at the Capitol. In the North Gallery, we've got Mike Conway, John Williams, Stephanie Hawkins, Bill LeMay, Lisa McCarter, Darren Chun, Mary Love, Bill Gillen, Shane Quick, Johnny Adams, Fred Langston, and Bill Ford and Tammy Stratton. Thank you.
A lady from Harrison, Ms. Crawford.
Yes, I'd ask that the House help me welcome the Doctor of the Day, Medical Director, Department of Anesthesiology at Memorial Hospital, Dr. Carl Ramsey.
Gentleman from Newton, Mr. Rushing.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd ask the House to help me welcome today my son in the South Gallery and his friend Lily Hatcher from England visiting us today.
Gentleman from Copiah, Mr. Holloway.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Ladies and gentlemen of the House, on behalf of the Copiah County delegation, Becky Carey and Representative Tom Weathersby in the South Gallery, I'd like to ask you to help me make welcome from the great Thermopolis of the world. Mary Kitchens, Tanya Mohawk, Stacy Crane, Mississippi Toughest Kids Foundation, Camp Kamasa, Crystal Springs. Let's help make them welcome.
Gentleman from DeSoto, Mr. Eubanks.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My good friend from DeSoto left a few people out. There were also several individuals here from Tate County and Marshall County. I don't have all the names, but y'all make them feel welcome.
Gentleman from Lafayette, Mr. Williamson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to direct your attention to the North Gallery. A few more of our friends from close to back home, Reba Bland, Sue Vaughn, Ann Phillips, Philip Carpenter, Carol, Mike, Lori, and Nancy. Thank you all for being here.
Gentleman from Lee, Mr. Aguirre.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. In the South Gallery, I would like to welcome Ms. Candace Hunt, who is with our Lee County Republican Women. Welcome to the Capitol, Candace.
Gentleman from Faulkner, gentleman from Marshall, Mr. Faulkner. There's a town called Faulkner.
That's right. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Ladies and gentlemen of the House, if we would stay with the North Gallery, allow me to introduce again my good friend, my constituent, and my Friday night karaoke partner, Ms. Letha McCarthy from Holly Springs. Thank you.
Are there any further introductions? Gentleman from Rankin, Mr. Yancey.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. In the South Gallery, we have Melanie Bostwick and Rodney Hall with FlexPoint, who's an extension of the largest online school district in the country, Florida Virtual School. Please help me make them welcome.
Any further introductions? Gentleman from Choctaw, Mr. Hood. Passes. All right, I don't see any further introductions. We'll go to the calendar. Rules calendar. Passes. Appropriations calendar. Passes. Ways and Means passes, which brings us to the general calendar. Any chairman have an item? Gentleman from Alcorn, Chairman of Judd B.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I would ask that we pass item number 2 and ask that it just remains placed on the calendar, please.
All right.
And I would take up.
Any objection? Hearing none, we'll do that.
Take up item number 3, House Bill 416.
All right, gentleman calls the bill up, moves that the rules be suspended, bill considered engrossed, read the third time, placed on final passage. All in favor say aye, opposed nay. The ayes have it. Gentleman's recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This bill is very simple. Comes to us from some of my sheriffs around home and others around the state. What it does is, in some rural counties, they don't have a hospital or they don't have a place for people who may be mentally committed to go. So they put them in the sheriff's office. They put them in the county jail. And when they do that, they book them in just like an ordinary criminal. And that booking information is subject to the Public Records Act. So it can show up in a newspaper, it can show up on a website, or, we've all seen this, mobile patrol, it'll show up on that. All this does is it exempts those people who are there for mental commitments from being listed as being booked into a county jail. So that's an explanation of the bill, Mr. Speaker.
Any questions? I don't see any. Open the machine, Madam Clerk. Question occurs on House Bill 416. If you favor the bill, vote aye. If you're opposed, vote nay. Has everyone voted? Close the machine, Madam Clerk. By vote 115 yeas and 0 nays, the bill passes. Next item.
Mr. Speaker, if you would recognize the lady from Hines to handle the next bill.
The lady from Hines is recognized.
This bill does not make any changes at all to expungement law.
Excuse me, lady. We need to call the bill up. Tell us which one you're on.
It's number 4 on the calendar.
All right, lady calls the bill up, moves that the rules be suspended. Bill considered in gross red the third time, placed on final passage. All in favor say aye. Opposed, nay. The ayes have it. Lady's recognized.
All right. House Bill 629 does not make any changement to existing expungement law. It does not add anything to the law. It does not take anything away from the law. It does not change who is allowed to get an expungement. No changes at all to the law. It simply moves all of the laws related to expungement to one code section. Those right now are all throughout the code section in a dozen or more areas. It simply puts them all in one section without making any changes to existing law. That's an explanation of the bill, Mr. Speaker.
Any question? Up there, you in or out? Lady from Lincoln.
I guess I'm confused. Why would we bother to do this? What's the purpose of putting it all under one section?
Sure. So we had hearings over the summer related to expungement, related to voter right restorations. We had several groups and individuals request that this be done, in addition to several other things. And this was by far the easiest and least controversial thing that we could do in an effort to clarify exactly what our expungement laws were, to put them in one area instead of in more than a dozen places throughout our very voluminous code sections.
So there has to be a reason why we would do it, like we're going to make it easier to expunge if we do this.
No, it's simply to clarify and to put things in one area. I know that's not something that we often do here. It just makes it easier for attorneys, for anybody that's trying to go through the code section.
Any further questions? I don't see any. Open the machine, Madam Clerk. Question occurs on House Bill 629. You favor the bill, vote aye. If you're opposed, vote nay. Everyone voted. Close the machine, Madam Clerk. By vote 114 yeas, 0 nays, the bill passes. Next item.
Mr. Speaker, I call up item number 5, House Bill 169. I ask that you recognize the gentleman from Rankin to handle the bill.
Gentleman calls the bill up, moves that the rules be suspended. Bill considered in gross red the third time, placed on final passage. All in favor say aye. Opposed, nay. The ayes have it. Gentleman from Rankin is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I have an amendment.
You're recognized for your amendment.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, my amendment simply changes the word from umpire to athletic official. And that's my explanation of the amendment, Mr. Speaker.
Questions? I don't see any. If you favor the amendment, indicate. You have a question? If you favor the amendment, indicate by saying aye. Opposed, nay. Ayes have it. Now we're back on the bill. Anything further on the bill?
Yeah, House Bill 169, it states that if you are an athletic official and you are assaulted at an athletic event, the charge of simple assault is elevated to aggravated assault. And that's my explanation of the bill, Mr. Speaker.
Questions? Gentleman from DeSoto, Mr. Hopkins.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Will the gentleman yield?
Sure.
Help me understand, we're raising the level of assault
Absolutely.
on this. So we don't already have laws that pertain to everybody across the board for being assaulted. We're going to make a special code for umpires?
For athletic officials, yes. What we found out, the chairman and I, we've done a lot of research on this. We've had parents, umpires, coaches, school officials, high school, activities association, mayors, supervisors, everybody who'd be involved in your local community. It's going to be in the same code section that protects you as a legislator.
I feel pretty protected.
Okay.
So, especially right now.
There's a need for it, yes. There's a problem of people who are wanting to get into officiating, especially younger people in smaller communities. And this is a problem.
Okay, thank you, gentlemen.
You're welcome.
Jim from Madison, Mr. Blackman.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Gentleman here.
Yes, sir.
Do you have a number of these type of events that you can cite for us that have occurred, say, in the last few years?
Yes, sir. There has been several.
No, do you have a number for me, though?
Oh, a number? No, I can try and get you one, though, but I don't have one.
Now, you mentioned that this will come in the code section that protects us.
Correct.
All right, but isn't it true that the people in that category are performing some type of public service or function, or in fact, are on the public payroll? Police officers, firemen, people in that category.
Yeah. Yeah, okay. Yes, same.
The answer would be yes.
Yes.
So now we are going to raise the level of umpires and referees to that category when we already have a statute that protects individuals, people, whether you hold a title or not. Am I right? The decision is made by the prosecutors whether or not the charge rises, the event rises to the level of a misdemeanor or an aggravated assault. That's correct, isn't it?
Yeah, it would be up to them on how the scope of how they were acting. Correct.
So we're going to take what would be classified now as a misdemeanor at a ball game and turn that into automatically be charged as a felony.
Yes.
Punishable by what? Up to how many years?
Yeah.
Because now you can get 20 years now for coming after one of us on a simple assault. Crazy deal, man.
Yes, sir. Up to 5 years on a simple.
Oh, you get 5 years now?
Yes, sir. Up to. Yes.
Okay. Have you personally seen that happen at any ball games you've attended?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. I grew up in the profession.
You're an umpire referee yourself?
Yes, sir.
You've been assaulted?
I have not, no, but I have seen it.
Tell me about the ones that you've seen, the last one you saw.
Well, my dad was a coach at Mississippi Valley State for 15 years, so I mean, we could, and he coached South Jackson. I mean, I could go on and on, you know, so.
But
yeah, it happens, and it is a problem.
Well, I have no doubt that in the heat of the battle, emotion, that somebody might bump off a referee. I've seen that happen. That now would be, usually nothing happens with that. But if somebody wants to pursue that or bump into a referee or an umpire, that could be charged as a felony now, couldn't it? And that includes the players on the field.
This is an official at the game, at an athletic event.
This would include players on the field.
This is for officials.
No.
Oh, yeah, yes.
So you got teenagers playing ball who get upset, muscle up to a referee. That could turn into a felony for a kid in high school, correct?
Yeah, they need to think about it.
We really want to do this, put this law on the books So kids can be brought into that loop. It's usually not the coach. It's usually the players that come in contact with referees, whether intentionally or inadvertently, right?
Yeah, I mean, if they assault an official, yeah.
No, this is simple assault. This is bumping into folk. This is not laying haymaker on them. This is if you brush, touch an official without that official's permission, that is an assault, is it not?
I mean, if they, yeah, I can't hear.
I said, if you right now, on the book for a simple assault.
They're having trouble hearing one another, ladies and gentlemen. Please hold your noise down. Gentleman from Madison, if you hold that microphone up a little more, I think we can hear you.
If you touch an individual without that individual's permission, that is simple assault, is it not?
Yes.
Then we really as a body want to bring that onto our football fields, our tennis courts, our basketball courts. We want to put those kids in that kind of position.
I want this bill to pass.
That answers that question.
Yes, sir.
Gentleman from Washington, Mr. Hines.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to speak against this bill.
Okay. Gentleman from Warren, Mr. Denton.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Gentlemen, will you yield?
Yes, sir.
I want to get back to what the gentleman from Madison was speaking about. Now, right now, what is the punishment for simple assault?
I believe we just said it was up to 5 years and $1,000 fine.
5 years and $1,000 fine.
Correct.
Now, what's going to be the punishment for an aggravated assault? Yeah. Right.
Aggravated assaults 1 to 20.
1 to 20?
Correct.
Are you sure on a simple assault, the punishment is?
No.
On a simple assault, the punishment is what now?
Up to 5.
So it starts at 1 to 5.
Mm-hmm.
Aggravated, you taking it from 1 to 5 to 1 to 20. Is that correct?
Yes.
And the fine for a simple assault is what?
1,000.
And a fine for an aggravated assault is what?
Yeah. Well, with the fine, how much? It's That's it? 5? Not more than 5,000?
Yeah, 5.
Okay, it's up to 5,000.
On an aggravated, it's up to 5,000.
Correct.
So, as the gentleman was referencing, a child could intentionally bump into an official and he could be charged with an aggravated assault versus a simple assault.
That'd be between you and the judge.
But if we put it in the law, will the judge have some leeway? If it's a law, the judge would not have any leeway with that, right?
It's going to be his call.
It's going to be his call to what? To say that it's simple or aggravated? When simple will be taken out of the law, won't nothing be there but aggravated. Is that not right?
Yes.
I mean, I'm not an attorney, so I'm asking.
Yes.
Is that right?
Yes.
Well, I think this is a horrible bill.
Okay.
And I'm hoping that everybody in this chamber feels the way that I feel. Thank you.
Mr. Speaker, I'd like to make a motion.
Yes, sir.
Just lay it on the table, subject to call.
Motion is to lay it on table, subject to call. All in favor say aye. Opposed, nay. Ayes have it. Ayes have it. Next item.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I would ask that I be able to skip down to item number 58 and allow the rest of the Jud B between that number to remain, or keep their place on the calendar.
Any objection? Hearing none, we'll do that. We'll move now to item 58, Before we get there, I'm going to recognize the gentleman from Montgomery, Mr. Oliver, for an introduction.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like for the House to join me and the gentleman from Choctaw in welcoming to the House chamber in the South Gallery today, Mr. Alan Sibley of Alan Sibley and the Magnolia Ramblers. We're glad to have you with us today, Alan.
Gentleman from Smith, Mr. Tullis. Did you pass? Gentleman from Marshall, Mr. Faulkner.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. On behalf of myself and Representative Chris Bell, we'd like to welcome Ms. Tina Owens and Ms. Nancy Freeman to the Capitol. Make them feel welcome.
All right. Gentlemen, we're moving now to item 58 on the calendar. House Bill 604. Gentleman calls the bill up, moves the rules be suspended. Bill considered in gross read the third time, placed on final passage. All in favor say aye. Opposed, nay. The ayes have it. Gentleman's recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Ladies and gentlemen, I honestly want to just do some non-con stuff today, but in any event, number 58 is House Bill 604. We've passed this out a number of years, and it is always kind of used as our DUI bill. What the bill does is it clarifies when there 120 days runs from the suspension of the license. Some of you practicing lawyers know that when your license is suspended, it's a 120-day suspension, but that suspension can be 9 months real quick, the way that suspension is counted. The bill is going to be used for some DUI language. It's the entire DUI code section in case we need to make any changes going forward throughout the session. I just wanted to keep the code section alive, so that's why the bill is before you. So with that said, Mr. Speaker, I would answer any questions or move for final passage.
Any questions on the bill? I don't see any. Open the machine, Madam Clerk. Question occurs on House Bill 604. If you favor the bill, vote aye. If you're opposed, vote nay. Has everyone voted? Close the machine, Madam Clerk. By a vote 116 yeas, 0 nays, the bill passes. Next item.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Item number, I would like to skip down to item number 63 and let the rest retain their place on the calendar, Mr. Speaker.
Any objection? We will do that.
If you would recognize, I'd call it up, item number 63, and ask that you recognize the gentleman from Covington.
Gentleman calls the bill up, moves that the rules be suspended. Bill considered in gross read the third time, placed on final passage. All in favor say aye. Opposed, nay. The ayes have it. Gentleman from Covington is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. House Bill 1310 is pretty straightforward. In addition to the clerk of the court, it would allow attorneys who have entered an appearance in the case to issue a subpoena. This is allowed in a lot of other states and in federal court, and that is an explanation of the bill.
Questions on the bill? Lady from Lincoln, Ms. Curry.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So you don't have to go before a judge to get a subpoena. You can just do one yourself?
That's correct.
But you're not worried at all about the abuse of that?
Well, this wouldn't change anything. I mean, right now, all you do is take a piece of paper to the clerk. She doesn't even look at it. She stamps it and gives it back to you, and you go serve it.
So you don't have to go before a judge now?
No. Well, I said that. I mean, you have to enter an appearance as being representing one of the parties, but no, you don't have to go before a judge to issue a subpoena.
Okay, so once again, I'm going to ask you, if you feel like this will be abused by attorneys.
No, I mean, if an attorney is abusing it, there are sanctions that the judge can do if they think something's being abused. Yeah, and it's already allowed in federal courts, and a lot of states do this as well.
I can't really hear you. I don't know why.
I said it's already allowed in federal courts and a lot of state courts as well. Other state courts allow this, but Mississippi does not.
Thank you.
Jim from Washington, Mr. Hines.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Quick question. Currently, the subpoena is filed in the court, and there's a record of that issuance in the court. What happens? Will that continue? Will the court get a copy to be filed into the file, or will the attorney just maintain that documentation?
No, it would still have to be in the court file, and 85% maybe, of course, in the state are electronic now, so attorneys file things from their offices now. And the other party immediately gets notification of it.
Okay, so answer me this scenario now. I serve the gentleman from Grenada a subpoena that has not been filed in the court. He says he does not receive it, has never received it, and it becomes an argue, he missed an important date or something. How does that impact his judgment? Or vice versa. I lie and say I served somebody and I did not, and there's no record in the file prior to that. How does that impact the judgments for those people?
Well, now, when you say,
I know that I serve subpoenas. I work in the law. I know that I'm asking the question, okay?
well, when you serve somebody, you have to file an affidavit of service.
That's correct.
In the court file. So your subpoenas would also have to be in the court file. So if you have issued a subpoena and not filed it in the court file, I would think, a judge would allow that subpoena to be quashed because the opposing party wouldn't necessarily have notice of it. The other party has to be noticed that a subpoena has been issued.
Okay, I just want to make sure that nobody comes in and does anything hanky-panky from out of state, say they served somebody and they didn't serve them. That's all I was trying to make sure that didn't happen. I know how you lawyers are.
Gentleman from Holmes, Mr. Clark.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Would the gentleman yield?
Yes, sir.
Gentlemen, I think I'm in favor of your bill, but I just got one question. I apologize. I hadn't got a chance to read it. And it's relating to notice. Is there a time frame in order to file in the court record, with the clerk? And I guess my concern is if I issue a subpoena, other side need notice in case they want to file a motion to squash or anything like that.
This bill does not require or does not change any kind of notice requirements.
Okay. And usually when you do electronic filing, they immediately, when the clerk stamp it, they immediately get notice. How would they get notice here?
I would not necessarily agree with that. They get notice when the clerk puts it into the system.
Correct.
Which may be later that day, could be the next day.
Right. And I guess my concern is, I don't want an attorney waiting 6 weeks before they file it just to prevent the other side from filing a motion to squash. So just somewhere along through the process, just if you're willing to take a look at that.
I wouldn't be opposed to that.
Okay. Thank you, gentlemen.
Gentleman from DeSoto, Mr. Eubanks.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Will gentleman yield?
Yes.
You said something earlier about the other parties being notified if you were to subpoena somebody in, say, a case that you were representing. Are there guarantees now that they're still going to get notified about the process?
Used to, if you filed something, you had to mail notice to them, and you had to sign a statement that you had served that to them, mailed it to them. Now, almost everybody is on MEC, which is electronic court. So if I file it from my computer, every attorney that is in that case immediately gets an email that I have filed it, and they get a copy of it. So I don't know if that answers your question, but either way, yes, either the attorney has to certify that they have mailed a copy to the opposing attorneys, or if it's on MEC, they immediately get it just as a matter of, electronically.
Okay, thank you.
Gentleman from Lawrence, Mr. Evans.
Thank you, Speaker. Gentleman, yield.
Yes, sir.
Gentlemen, not trying to be difficult, but this just jumped into my head when I read this. If I issue a subpoena under this statute and the other side says he didn't issue it, is that going to put me in a sort of a little 9-line bind because all of a sudden I'm probably a substantive witness all of a sudden in this case?
I didn't hear something you said. You said, and the other side does what? You file it and the other side does what?
If I filed and served a subpoena,
okay,
and the other side says he didn't serve me, the only witness I have that I served the subpoena is me. Is this going to put me in a situation where I'm trying to represent one party and yet turn me into a substantive witness, at least on this issue?
Yeah. I don't think this affects any of that, because again, if it's on MEC, it has to be input into the system, has to be in the court file, and they'll get notification. If it's not an MEC, then you're going to have to mail notice to them. But I would think that would be certainly a grounds to quash whatever,
Well, I certainly understand it's going to be on MEC if I file it on there. But I can file anything I want to on MEC. That doesn't mean that what I filed, in fact, happened. And if they say he filed this on MEC, but he did not serve me like he says he did, then the judge is going to have some kind of hearing, and all of a sudden I'm going to be a witness.
Personally, this is not that bad.
Yeah. Chairman reminds me, this is not going to be any different from anything else with a process server filing it, which normally when I file a process server affidavit, they enclose whatever you serve to them with the affidavit.
Well, certainly, I understand, but certainly there's a big difference, because if that comes up, then that process server is going to be the witness that says, hey, I did file this, and the lawyer is only going to be a lawyer. If the lawyer himself filed this, which this gives me, the way I read it, gives me authority to do that. And I know you say, well, if you don't want to do it as a lawyer, don't. It won't be a problem. This just jumped into my head. I'm not trying to kill your bill or anything like it. It's a serious question that jumped straight into my head.
I guess I'm not, you're a lot smarter than me, gentlemen. Maybe I'm not following exactly, but there's the issue, right? Issue the subpoena and serving the subpoena, right? So are you saying if an attorney also not only issues it, but also serves it himself? Is that what you're asking about?
Well, when it says that, it says it authorize an attorney to issue a subpoena. I would presume that means any subpoena, witness subpoena, ducis tecum, whatever, that I have to say that I filed on a particular person in order to maybe try to save my client money.
Right.
And then they say, well, he put it on there, but he didn't file it.
Right.
All of a sudden, that judge is going to have to hear from me as a witness on the issue of whether or not it was actually served on someone.
Well,
I keep saying filing, but I mean service.
Well, nothing with service is affected by this. This only affects the issuance, right? So instead of a clerk stamping it, this would allow the attorney to sign it and file it. So I don't think that,
And serve it.
Well, the attorney can serve it, I guess, if they want to.
Right.
But that's,
I got you. I'm not trying to kibosh your bill. I know a lot of lawyers, and I could see this coming up. One of them sitting there behind. Thank you.
Lady from Hines, Ms. Yates.
All right, so we've been doing this in federal court for many, many years, since I've been out of law school, so since 2007. I'm not aware of any issues with that, are you?
I'm not.
Okay. And just to make it clear, when a subpoena is issued, that simply means that the subpoena has been signed by someone, correct?
Correct.
Someone else typically serves the subpoena, correct?
In most cases.
Does this bill do anything with respect to service of process or changing the rules of civil procedure with respect to service of process?
No.
Does it do anything with respect to filing proof of service of process?
No.
Does it do anything with respect to filing proof of notice of issuance of a subpoena?
No.
Thank you.
Thank you, lady.
Gentleman from Pearl River, Mr. Owen. Gentleman from Hines, Mr. Brown.
I really wouldn't talk this.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Gentleman, yield, please.
Yes, sir.
As a layman outside of the arena of law, I would like to know, gentlemen, what is this going to do to improve, shall we say, the current system that we're operating under in terms of serving subpoenas? What benefit, except perhaps for the attorney's convenience, is this going to do for us as citizens?
It's a good question, gentlemen. So I would say that it saves the clerk's time, it saves the attorney's time, And because it saves the attorney's time, it saves clients money, and it doesn't make any difference as to any substantive part of the matter. So I see it as a plus, plus, plus.
I don't see any further questions. Open the machine, Madam Clerk. Question occurs on House Bill 1310. If you favor the bill, vote aye. If you're opposed, vote nay. Has everyone voted? Has everyone voted? By a vote of 102 to 13, bill passes. All right, Judge B yields the floor. Any other chairman have an item? Chairman of Corrections.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I would call up item number 15, House Bill 514, and advance the usual motion.
Gentleman calls the bill up, moves the rules be suspended, bill considered and engrossed, read the third time, placed on final passage. All in favor say aye. Opposed nay. The ayes have it. Gentleman's recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. All this bill does is extend the repealer on the drug and alcohol program at Bolivar County for 4 years. That's the explanation.
Questions? I don't see any. Open the machine, Madam Clerk. Question occurs on House Bill 514. You favor the bill, vote aye. If you're opposed, vote nay. Has everyone voted? Has everyone voted? Closed machine, Madam Clerk. By a vote of 116 yeas, 0 nays, the bill passes. Gentleman from Lee, Mr. Aguirre. You have an introduction? You recognize.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I would like to let everyone make welcome Miss Nikki McMahon in the South Gallery. Nikki, wave to everybody.
Lady from Harrison, Ms. Crawford.
Yes, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to reintroduce our doctor of the day, who is now on the floor, Dr. Carl Ramsey, who's medical director of the Department of Anesthesiology at Memorial Hospital.
Thank you, Doc. We appreciate your service to us today. Next item.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'll call up item number 16, House Bill 515, and advance usual motions.
Gentleman calls the bill up, moves the rules be suspended, bill considered engrossed, read the third time, placed on final passage. All in favor say aye. Opposed nay. The ayes have it. Gentleman's recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. All this bill does is extend the repealer on the governor's emergency powers and overcrowding Act to July the 1st, 2025. That's the explanation, Mr. Speaker.
Questions? I don't see any. Open the machine, Madam Clerk. Question occurs on House Bill 515. If you favor the bill, vote aye. If you're opposed, vote nay.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Everyone voted. Close the machine, Madam Clerk. By a vote of 117 yeas, 0 nays, the bill passes. Next item.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Call up item number 17, House Bill 534, and advance the usual motions.
Gentleman calls the bill up, moves the rules to be suspended. Bill considered engrossed, read the third time, placed on final passage. All in favor say aye. Opposed nay. The ayes have it. Gentleman recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Again, this is a repeal bill that advances the ISP ankle monitor, usually called ankle monitor program, and home detention program till 2025. That's the explanation of the bill.
Questions on the bill? I don't see any. Open the machine, Madam Clerk. Question occurs on House Bill 534. You favor the bill, vote aye. If you're opposed, vote nay. Has everyone voted? Close the machine, Madam Clerk. By a vote of 117 yeas, 0 nays, the bill passes. Next item.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Item number 18, House Bill number 683 extends the repealer on the State Parole Board to July the 1st, 2025.
Questions? Oh, did we not call it up? Gentleman calls the bill up, moves the rules be suspended. Bill considered engrossed, read a third time, placed on final passage. All in favor say aye. Opposed, nay. The ayes have it. Questions on the bill? I don't see any. Open the machine, Madam Clerk. Question occurs on House Bill 683. If you favor the bill, vote aye. If you're opposed, vote nay. Everyone voted. Close the machine, Madam Clerk. By a vote of 116 yeas, 0 nays, the bill passes. Next item.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Let me make sure. Call up item number 19, House Bill 907, the Reentry Court Act of 2022, and advance the usual motion.
Gentleman calls the bill up, moves the rules be suspended. Bill considered engrossed, read the third time, placed on final passage. All in favor say aye. Opposed, nay. The ayes have it.
Have an amendment, Mr. Speaker.
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear you, Jim. You have a committee sub?
Committee sub, I do.
Gentleman moves committee substitute be adopted for consideration in lieu of the original bill. All in favor say aye. Opposed, nay. The ayes have it. Gentleman's recognized.
I have an amendment, Mr. Speaker.
You're recognized for an amendment.
As far as the explanation, Your Honor, is puts a reverse repealer in there in the bill.
Questions on the amendment? I don't see any. If you favor the amendment, indicate by saying aye. Opposed, nay. The ayes have it.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As an explanation on the bill, this is the reentry court that we passed last year, I think somewhere around 100 votes. I put a reverse repealer in it because I've had some conversations with the Judd B. chairman, as well as corrections chairman, pertaining to some language that we're having discussions on pertaining to when individuals are placed into the reentry court. And also we're working on some language to basically combine all the intervention courts under one umbrella, try to figure out whether or not we can save some money doing that. Basically, the only change, well, I say the only change, a couple of changes. There's some court jurisdictions that requested to be put into the bill, 5th District, 14th District, and 17th District. And I've reached out to a number of my circuit court judges to find out whether or not they have interest in including their districts in the reentry court, which is required to be done at the time that someone is sentenced under this provision, and putting a reverse repealer in there so we can give them time to check with their board of supervisors, see whether or not they're financially able to include their districts in the reentry programming. That's the explanation of the bill.
Questions? Gentleman from Prentice, Mr. Turner.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Would the gentleman yield?
Yes.
This reentry court that we have here, is this the same thing as the drug court?
It is not the same thing as drug court, gentlemen. It involves, it will have an A&D component to it, because a lot of the individuals that will go into the reentry court will actually do a term of incarceration and then bring themselves back to court. Drug court is a diversion type situation to keep them from going into the system and doing their drug court outside Department of Correction. This is a situation where you will be ordered in reentry after you serve the term of incarceration, either in the county jail, MDOC, or a work program or something like that, gentlemen.
Thank you, gentlemen. Would you agree that it might not be a bad idea for this court to maybe borrow some best practice ideas from the drug courts, since they've been so successful in the past?
Gentlemen, I'm hopeful, and I hope I made myself clear that we're trying to integrate some of the best practices through the drug court system. I met with Chief Justice Randolph and Mr. Snowden. We're trying to do some things that we can streamline all this under one umbrella, take advantage of some of the successes in the drug court arena, and hopefully we can get that done.
Gentlemen, I appreciate that. I think that'd be one of the most successful moves that probably our corrections has ever made, if we can do that. Thank you, sir.
I appreciate your question.
Lady from Pearl River, Ms. Wilkes.
Gentlemen, will you yield?
Move final passage. Yes, ma'am, I'll yield that.
Thank you, gentlemen. So I just want to understand, like, are there any crimes that are excluded from this?
I believe that this only applies to nonviolent offenders at this time.
Nonviolence? Okay, but also it says on here that after 3 years, their sentence is, they're automatically released to this after 3 years, so they'll only serve 3 years?
No, they're not automatically. They're considered after that period of time. The court can go in and not let them come back to reentry depending on their conduct while they're incarcerated.
Okay, so it's just an opportunity at 3 years?
Opportunity, right.
Okay, thank you,
They can
gentlemen.
order them to reentry, but they do not automatically get it. They have to abide by the rules and regulations of MDOC while they're in that. It's an incentive program, ma'am.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you for your question.
I don't see any further questions. Open the machine, Madam Clerk. Question occurs on House Bill 907. You favor the bill, vote aye. If you're opposed, vote nay. Everyone voted. Close machine, Madam Clerk. By vote 114 yeas, 0 nays, bill passes. Next item.
Mr. Speaker, call up item number 20, House Bill 586, and advance the usual motion.
Gentleman calls the bill up, moves the rules be suspended, bill considered and gross read the third time, placed on final passage. All in favor say aye. Opposed nay. The ayes have it. Gentleman's recommended.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This piece of legislation is the 747 bill that we passed last year. I believe we have a reverse repeal. I move to adopt the committee sub, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, gentlemen. Gentleman moves adoption of committee substitute for consideration in lieu of the original bill. All in favor say aye. Opposed nay. The ayes have it. You recognize, gentlemen.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This is 747, gentleman from Rankin County's bill last year, the pilot program in Rankin County. During committee, we were waiting on some reports from Rankin County. I got those reports on the success of that program and some of the things that needed to be changed. This bill includes a reverse repealer. We're going to include some other counties, again, much like the reentry court, some other sheriffs and counties are interested in doing the same thing, but we have to make sure that these counties that are included are financially able to do that and have the infrastructure in place. MDOC also wants to be involved in some of the reporting requirements so certain individuals don't fall through the cracks when they're in these programs and not getting credit for the time that they're serving, and also making sure that when they get released that they are in the system and make sure their conditions of ERS, parole, they can abide by those and be set up when they're released. That's the explanation of the committee sub, Mr. Speaker.
Questions? Jim from Hines, Mr. Brown.
Seems like this is a good piece of legislation.
I yield. I yield.
You yield? Yes, sir. Excuse me. Thank you. What other counties are you anticipating on extending this to? Because I think the other counties can be beneficial from this, and I spoke that last year. I know we exclusively did it for Rankin County, and I heard you say you're going to open up perhaps for other counties. Would you please tell us something about that?
We've had some interest from some, I shouldn't say counties, from some districts, circuit court districts, and including counties within some of those districts. I talked to Madison County, which is in the same circuit court district as Rankin, DeSoto County, and I've had several counties, several judges advance come to me in the Delta, and I anticipate as we go through the process that we're going to reach out to certain areas and see if they're interested in being involved in it. I don't see any reason for MDOC to be keeping up with just one county jail. If this is a successful program, as they indicate to me that it has been, we need to advance it and get involved in a little bit more local corrections, letting your judges and your local DA and your sheriffs, they know individuals that can be successful in these programs in their communities, and hopefully we can reach out and get some of that done.
I don't see any further questions. Open machine, Madam Clerk. Question occurs on House Bill 586. You favor the bill, vote aye. If you're opposed, vote nay.
I'm going to pass.
Everyone voted. Closed machine, Madam Clerk. By vote 114 yeas, 0 nays, bill passes. Next item.
Mr. Speaker, I ask that item 21 be passed at this time and remain its place on the calendar.
Any objection? Hearing none, we will do that. Anything further?
Speaker will indulge me 1 second. A call up, I passed on item, with Speaker's permission, get to item 68, ask that it remain as placed on the calendar.
Any
Pass
objection?
at this time.
We'll do that.
Call up item number 69, omnibus bill, House Bill 906.
Gentleman calls the bill up, moves the rules be suspended. Bill considered and gross, read the third time, placed on final passage. All in favor say aye. Opposed, nay. The ayes have it. You got a committee substitute.
I do have a committee sub, Mr. Speaker.
Gentleman moves committee substitute be adopted for consideration in lieu of the original bill. All in favor say aye. Opposed, nay. The ayes have it. Gentleman's recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This bill does basically two things to the current law as it stands and brings forward a number of code sections that I've been in conversation with Chairman Barnett to do some things pertaining to re-entry that are going to be required to be changed in this code section. The first thing it does, in the geriatric parole provision as the current law exists, those individuals that are eligible for geriatric parole are not eligible for trafficking of a controlled substance, but are eligible for the more serious crime of aggravated trafficking. What this does is basically flip that over to make those individuals eligible for geriatric parole for trafficking, but not aggravated trafficking, which was the intent of 585 back in 2014. We caught that just recently that language was incorrect. And the second thing it does, as far as trafficking, it provides eligibility for earned time through MDOC. It does not expand parole. That's an explanation of the bill.
Questions? The lady from Lincoln, Ms. Curry.
Will you yield, gentlemen?
Certainly.
Just making sure there's...
It has a reverse repealer in it as well.
Okay. Just making sure, because I was trying to read as quickly as I could, that there's no nursing home issues in this bill.
Other than the geriatric parole, but that's not really a nursing home issue.
Thank you.
There's nothing in it.
I don't see any further questions. Open the machine, Madam Clerk. Question occurs on House Bill 906. If you favor the bill, vote aye. If you're opposed, vote nay. Has everyone voted? Close machine, Madam Clerk. By vote 115 yeas, 1 nay, the bill passes. Next item.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Call up item number 70, House Bill 919, in advance of the usual motion.
Gentleman calls the bill up, moves the rules be suspended. Bill considered and gross, read the third time, places on final passage. All in favor say aye. Opposed, nay. The ayes have it. Gentleman's recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This comes from MDOC, a request of the commissioner that would allow them to get for DFA to provide a leasing policy for agricultural products. Currently, the law is that they can have a DFA purchasing policy, but not a leasing policy. And the commissioner represents to me, as well as his executive director, that they could save some money and develop their budget much better if they could lease farm equipment there at Parchment as opposed to being required to purchase it. They can get better pricing on the leases and turn equipment in whenever it's within the term of the lease. And that's the explanation of the bill.
Questions? I don't see any. Open machine, Madam Clerk. Question occurs on House Bill 919. If you favor the bill, vote aye. If you're opposed, vote nay. Has everyone voted? Close machine, Madam Clerk. By vote 115 yeas and 1 nay, the bill passes. Next item.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Item number 71, House Bill 935. Move to advance the usual motions.
Chairman calls the bill up, moves the rules be suspended. Bill considered and gross, read the third time, placed on final passage. All in favor say aye. Opposed nay. The ayes have it. You got a committee sub?
I do. I move to adopt the committee sub.
Gentleman moves committee substitute be adopted for consideration in lieu of the original bill. All in favor say aye. Opposed nay. The ayes have it. Gentleman's recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We passed this bill last year that allowed for judges to use workforce training programs and also nonprofit private entities to be involved in drug and alcohol, as well as to be involved in reentry programming throughout the non-adjudication process. The Senate was offended by the fact that there was a $2,000 removal of money from the community corrections budget, community college budget, and we took that provision out, and I think it'll pass through the Senate this time without that requirement. And that's the explanation of the bill.
Questions? Gentleman from Prentice, Mr. Turner.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. But gentlemen,
Yes,
you mentioned the community colleges there. Is that in reference probably to the virtual training that they had agreed to do?
yes, sir. The pilot program. And also, I don't know if you remember, they're now allowed to give Pell Grants for workforce training upon application, and this would allow on the non-adjudication process to access those Pell Grants as well.
How many correctional units in the state is hooked up and running on the virtual now?
I cannot answer that, but I'll get that answer for you, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Lady from Jones, Ms. Scott.
Gentlemen, on this bill, as it relates to the junior college, now if a person is, I don't know anything about judiciary, and I generally don't even ask y'all anything, but on this non-adjudication, these would be young people, right?
Well, it's not necessarily just for
But many of them would be, right?
I would say 90% of the offenders in the non-adjudication program are under the age of 26.
Okay, and so at the junior colleges right now, a young person can go there and enroll in their adult skills program, can they not?
That's correct.
All right, would they be precluded from doing that?
No, ma'am.
And so would it be that these organizations that you're talking about, would it be that they could enter into some sort of relationship with the junior college to make sure that they can refer these young people there for those resources?
Well, they would, they could, but they would have to really get involved with developing a relationship with the judge in order to approve that, ma'am.
Okay, and so if the young person, for instance, goes and maybe they receive their GED, but their learning skills in mathematics is low. And so the counselor refers them to the TABE, to that program where they work for the TABE, and they can get their math skills up to 12th grade or their reading skills up to 12th grade. Isn't that what we want to do, to try to get young people, to give them a second chance so they can turn their lives around? Isn't that what we really want to try to do?
I would certainly hope so, ma'am.
And so why would we preclude a young person, particularly if they're able to, under some circumstances, be able to get their record expunged, then they could get into a workforce training program. It could have helped that young person to move to the next level and not have to be, back in trouble again. Doesn't that, to me, that makes sense, does it not?
Yes, ma'am.
And so why would the junior colleges, in my mind, why would they be opposed to something like that when we all know, if everybody's child was perfect and none of us have perfect children, then we wouldn't have these problems. But because
Speak for yourself now, speak for yourself.
Well, but because we have some children who have some issues,
Yes,
and they have to work their way through these things.
Yes, ma'am, I
And
understand.
when a child gets to that point, why would we not want to make sure that we give them every opportunity, particularly at one of our state-funded institutions? I don't understand that. Can you explain that to me?
Well, I can't explain that. You'd have to take that up with the community college.
And then finally, on the workforce part, is it any way, perhaps that, we could, because we can do, but is there any way, or had the committee thought about allowing for some dollars, whatever that $2 million or whatever that little lousy amount of money they're talking about, that our workforce training dollars could be put there and those young people could take advantage of it through another way?
Is there any way in this particular legislation? Is that your question?
I think, I think you could with an amendment.
I don't see how under these provisions on this particular act you could do that, ma'am.
Well, you're on appropriations, aren't you, Jim?
Yes, ma'am. We could do it through that process.
Thank you.
Yes.
Don't see any further questions. Open the machine, Madam Clerk. Question occurs on House Bill 935. If you favor the bill, vote aye. If you're opposed, vote nay. Has everyone voted? Close the machine, Madam Clerk. By vote 115 yeas, 0 nays, the bill passes. Anything further?
Yield the floor.
Corrections yields the floor. Chairman of Public Health. I'm going to recognize Madam Clerk to read the report of the Committee on Public Health.
Report of Committee on Public Health and Human Services, House Bill 1509, COVID-19 vaccine mandate, prohibits state and local government from imposing time sufficient to pass.
Gentleman is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to call up House Bill number 1509. Call up, make the usual motion.
Gentleman calls the bill up, moves the rules be suspended, bill considered in gross read the third time, placed on final passage. All in favor say aye. Opposed, nay. Ayes have it.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Ladies and gentlemen of the House, House Bill 1509. The subject of this piece of legislation is the COVID-19 vaccine mandates and also offering religious liberties to our citizens here in Mississippi. Section 1 deals with the definition, basically it's dealing with the definition of the passport and also what the vaccination status really means. And then Section 2, really the main part of this legislation is in each section or each A, B, and C, and D of Section 1, specifically it says a state agency, public official, state institution of higher learning, public community or junior college, county, municipality, or other political subdivision of the states refuse, withhold from, or deny. They cannot deny a person services, goods, or facilities. They cannot refuse employment. They cannot refuse to serve anyone if that person chooses in that capacity not to get a COVID-19 vaccine. Again, that is just with those that I just mentioned a minute ago. Secondly, number 3, and this is important, this section shall not apply to vaccine requirements set forth for schools, so this does not affect the school vaccines. This is dealing with just strictly COVID-19 issues. And then, importantly, ladies and gentlemen, on line 69, and I'm going to read it because it is important. It's something that our citizens have asked for and they're getting today. An employee of any public or private employer who has a sincerely held religious objection to receiving a vaccine for COVID-19 shall not be required to receive a vaccine for COVID-19. So this legislation specifically it deals with COVID-19. It specifically deals with religious liberties for a private and public employer only for COVID-19. And then again, it only deals with the state agencies that I talked about a few minutes ago. So, ladies and gentlemen, that is the explanation of the bill. We passed it out of committee today, and that is the explanation of the bill, Mr. Speaker.
Questions? Jim from Hines, Mr. Bell.
Gentlemen, you yield.
Yes, sir.
So I have some strong opinions about this piece of legislation. Now you talk about religious freedom. I'm sorry, what'd you call it? What type of freedom did you call it?
It's on Section 69, gentlemen, it says, I'll read again, employee of any public or private employer who has a sincerely held religious objection to receiving a vaccine, a COVID-19 vaccine.
So, gentlemen, I have a religious objection against individuals who know that they are infected by COVID-19 and come around individuals who have serious health problems. Would that qualify in this bill?
Gentlemen, that issue is not in this legislation.
It's not?
No,
so it basically says that, paraphrasing, that if I don't want to take the vaccine, I don't have to take the vaccine, I don't have to be.
But gentlemen, I learned 12 years ago.
Nobody can deny me employment, et cetera, et cetera.
I guess in 2012, we learned, many of us who were here then, not to address hypotheticals. So again, clearly on the religious objection, it clearly states an employee of any public or private employer who has a sincerely held religious objections to receiving a vaccine does not have to take that vaccine. It will be up to that employer to verify that employee's sincerity employee and that employer will have to come up with a way that he or she determines those issues.
So does this qualify for individuals that are currently in the military to serve in the National Guard or?
It's clear on the first section that's defined is what I can read it again for you. A state agency, public official, state institution of higher learning, public community or junior college, county, municipality, or other political subdivision of the state. And that's what we're addressing from the state standpoint. And then secondly, we did add the public or private employer dealing with the religious exemptions.
All right, thank you, Jim.
Yes, sir.
Jim from Madison, Mr. Black.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Jim and Yale.
Yes, sir.
Gentlemen, this legislation, if it passes and becomes law, will apply to the Mississippi National Guard.
Yes, sir. That, I'm told, is a state agency, so yes, sir, it would fall underneath the categories that I just read.
Gentlemen, historically, you're familiar with back in 1917, when this country had probably the most, even greater than this, devastating virus to hit our shores. It was called the Spanish flu.
I'm somewhat familiar with that, just about what's been happening here lately. Yes, sir, but you may know more about that situation than I do.
Well, I don't know, but I'm going to find out in a minute. During that period of our history, we did not have the kind of travel that we have now, interstate, international. Of course, you understand that, right?
I would assume, gentlemen, that our travel today is a lot easier than it was back in 1917.
Well, you know that during that same time period, we had one of the most devastating and costly wars that this country has experienced, and that was World War I. Right?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
And the way the Spanish flu hit our shores was through the military. People experiencing exposure overseas and then returning to this country. And before it was over, we had 50 million people who died from the Spanish flu during a period of time, a matter of years, correct?
Gentlemen, again, I'm not familiar with that time, and so I've not researched it, so I'm really not going to be able to give you an answer, yes or no.
Well, I'll just put it this way. While you may not know that, there's no reason to dispute that number. All right. And during that same period of time, to 1917 to the 1920s, there was legislation passed, not just in this state, but all over the country, to prohibit certain kinds of restrictions on people, exercise of their individual freedoms, such as not to wear masks. That was a main weapon of defense we had at that time for Spanish flu, because we didn't have a vaccination. And there were people who, and not just individuals, but bodies just like this, that passed restrictions on laws, that is, that prohibited the imposition of mandatory mask wearing. You didn't know about that, of course.
No, sir. I still don't.
What I'm getting at, though, since you now have discovered that this legislation applies to our National Guard, who may be called upon in a moment's notice, maybe tomorrow if there's a sufficient emergency, to come collectively together and to involve themselves in the duties and responsibilities that come with their service in the National Guard. Right? And according to this legislation, you can't even ask, if this passes, you can't even ask if they've been vaccinated. Right?
That's correct. Yes, sir.
And so people that, the communities they go into and the agencies that they involve themselves with helping won't know how to take precautions against those individuals who are there to help them, because you can't ask them going in, have you been vaccinated? Correct?
That's correct, but I guess I would also, gentlemen, say if you're taken out of the state agencies and National Guard, we could also look at other officials that are state agencies that maybe travel state to state, may not out of country. We could also look at our citizens here in Mississippi who may travel out of the country and come back and then go work for an employer and say, and then have that religious liberties, that exemption for religious liberties. So I think the spirit is in the same discussion.
Not quite. The only reason I use the National Guard because that's the one that has a significant historical comparison as to how so many of our citizens passed and died while others were fighting the one thing that we had at that time to protect ourselves, and that's the mask mandate. So I use that strictly to just compare that. There are other issues such as University Medical Center. University Medical Center now has mask requirements. They'll ask you when you're into those wards and you got healthcare professionals who come in, I'm going to ask you if you agree with this, whether or not you've been vaccinated. My experience is they don't ask for a card, they simply ask you, have you been vaccinated? You understand that that question is asked specifically so those people know how to react or handle their duties of looking after the patient and treating the patient. So this legislation now will tell the University Medical Center, any other state healthcare institution, clinic, agency, that you can't ask that patient when they come, who you're going to be in close proximity to. Sometimes and many times they are not required because you can't treat them with a mask on.
No, sir, that's not correct.
That's not correct?
No, sir.
Okay, tell me why not.
Well, I can read it to you, but it's around the line 55. If you are a medical facility, you can ask your employers, you can make recommendations, you can suggest they get vaccinated, you can suggest they wear a mask. If you're a healthcare facility, you can have reasonable safety procedures in place. And as you well know, as a learned attorney, the Supreme Court did rule that healthcare facilities can require their employees to get vaccinated.
It's asking the question is what I'm saying. This legislation speaks to asking a question, not the mandate. That's not has anything to do with my question to you. I mean, simply asking the question.
Gentlemen, it's clear they can ask the questions. You just cannot prohibit what I went through about services, employment, and things like that, but you can ask any question.
Well, I saw in the legislation that maybe I just read it too fast, that you can't even ask that question.
No, sir, you can.
Maybe I go back and look at it, and maybe I won't see that word you can't ask in there again.
Yes, sir.
It just disappeared?
I guess you'll have to read it again.
Jim Mark Tibbet Hall, Mr. Taylor.
Let me find that.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Gentlemen, will you yield?
Yes, sir.
I too have some heartburn about this bill. COVID-19 was labeled a pandemic, is that correct?
Yes, sir.
And it was because of the amount of deaths that occurred because of people contracting COVID-19, is that correct?
Gentlemen, I don't know what the legal definition of a pandemic is and what those numbers cause it to be.
But surely it was enough to warrant a national and a state emergency.
Sure.
Okay. Well, you know, I can remember the time when actually there was an AIDS pandemic as well. Is that correct?
Gentlemen, that may have been in the early 80s, so I don't recall all of that information so far back then, so.
But surely you remember that.
I remember that conversation.
Yes. So my point is, and as legal counsel, I'd like to ask a question. In the state of Mississippi, if you willfully and knowingly, if you contracted HIV and passed it along and that person died, is that a crime?
Gentlemen, I'm not an attorney, and you're going to have to, you got one next to you to your left, he may can answer that question, I don't know.
You know, and I actually asked both of them, and they said it was a crime.
Okay.
So are we giving permission to state employees that knowingly know that they have contracted COVID-19 to prevent others from contracting it? Are we saying that they should not be considered as having any cause of action to make sure that they cannot protect other people. In other words, if I have it and I give it to you, you die. Should I not be concerned about that? Should we not be concerned?
No, sir, I don't believe that this piece of legislation deals with that. No, sir.
And I do understand that we're addressing this piece of legislation. But are we addressing that in the state of Mississippi, saying that we will have people knowingly have contracted COVID-19 as a state employee, and for whatever reason, give it to another employee?
No, sir. I think the legislation is very clear, and it says that if you are a public or private employer and you are an employee, you can, for religious exemptions, not take the COVID-19 vaccination. Secondly, as I listed earlier, a state agency, public official, and I list those entities, you cannot refuse employment, you cannot deny services, you cannot refuse to serve, and so it's very clearly what you cannot do if that person chooses not to get the COVID-19 vaccine.
Okay. Gentlemen, thank you for your responses. I do believe this is a bad bill.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Lady from Hines, Ms. Yates.
Does the gentleman yield?
Yes, ma'am.
All right. My questions are specifically about the language on lines 68 through 70 dealing with private employers. It states that an employee of any public or private employee who has a sincerely held religious objection. I don't see that this bill defines sincerely held religious objection. Am I missing that?
No, ma'am.
Okay. I also don't see that it references the burden of proof. Who has to establish whether or not the religious objection is founded or unfounded? Is that going to our businesses, or is that going to the person asserting the objection?
The lady under this bill, the employer, would have to believe that this person has a sincerely held religious objection to receiving the COVID-19 vaccination.
That's not actually stated in this bill, though, is it?
Well, it's clear to me that an employee of any public or private employer who has sincerely held religious objections to receiving a vaccine shall not be required. And so,
but it doesn't say whether or not the burden of proof for establishing whether or not the sincerely held religious objection falls on the employer or on the employee asserting the objection. Correct?
One second, lady. Thank you, lady. Based on information from council, the EEOC in December said this was not discriminatory to not have them get the vaccine, and so it will be up to the employee and the employer to work that out based on his or her religious beliefs.
So we're opening up all of our private employers, all of our small businesses, all of our large businesses in Mississippi to employment lawsuits.
Well, I guess
our pro-business, Republican-led, supermajority legislature is going after our businesses.
No, ma'am.
Private businesses.
No, ma'am. I think today we are telling the citizens of Mississippi that based on the public sector, we're giving you, if you work with your state agency and the ones I've listed, then at that point you cannot refuse services, deny employment based on if a person chooses to get the vaccine or not. More importantly, we're telling the citizens of Mississippi that we believe in your religious abilities, religious rights to choose, determine if you want to get this vaccine or not. And then we believe that you will have a relationship between your employer, that y'all will be able to determine what is a sincere religious belief. And this legislation clearly says that.
If we're worried about the individuals, is there a reason why we don't have an opt-out provision for a medical reason? We only picked religion?
Well, lady, there's already a medical exemption today.
It's not listed in here.
The Department of Health currently has medical exemptions for vaccines.
Religious exemption already exists as well under case law. But you chose to put that in here, correct?
It's in here, correct. The legislation.
But you didn't choose to put any other exemption specifically in here as to private businesses.
No, lady, you're looking at the legislation just like I am, and so we're on the same page, lady.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Gentleman from Forest, Mr. Watson.
If the chairman would yield.
Yes, sir.
Maybe I missed something. We are still in a pandemic, are we?
Yes, sir. There's no doubt that our cases are increasing. I think the acuity level of most of these patients are not like it was months ago, but yes, sir, we're still mindful of where we are today.
And in passing this, considering this legislation, are we trying to take steps to achieve herd immunity?
With this,
are we giving people options not to become vaccinated?
Well, gentlemen, it's clear what we're doing today. You're giving religious liberties for people who work in the private and public sector who have issues with the COVID-19 vaccine. And then more importantly, or secondly, we have listed out in the legislation who would qualify from a state agency standpoint. And so it's clear that if you choose not to get vaccinated, you cannot refuse employment, you cannot be denied services, which is spelled out in the legislation.
Okay, now how would this affect, or would it affect the court system?
Beg your pardon?
How would this affect the court system if I'm a litigant, if I'm a witness, and
gentlemen, the Supreme Court is a state agency, and they would fall underneath the criteria in this legislation.
Okay, so this would, the legislature would be basically determining or giving people even exemptions to work or to be affiliated with the court system.
Well, gentlemen, it clearly states out in each section who would qualify, basically the state agency, public official, state institution. So it lists those. So if the courts are in that system, which they are, then it would qualify.
Okay. Now, directing your attention, Mr. Chairman, to lines 68 through 70, would I be correct in saying I could just write out a statement saying I have sincere religious objections to receiving the vaccine for COVID-19, and that would be sufficient to give me an exemption from my public or private employer?
Gentlemen, you're going to have to show that to your employer. You've got to have that relationship with your employer, and it's very clear that it's got to be, you're showing that sincerity, held religious objection, showing that to your employer.
So you're saying I would have to do more than just write out a statement saying because of my religion, I have sincere religious objection to the vaccine, and that should be sufficient, shouldn't it?
Yes, sir.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Lady from Lincoln, Ms. Curry.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Will the gentleman yield?
Yes, ma'am.
Gentlemen, is it true that you can get COVID even after you've been vaccinated and boosted and everything else?
It is my understanding.
Do we have long-term effects of this vaccine? Has it been studied long-term? Where everybody's comfortable in putting this vaccination in their body?
Well, lady, you're well aware that the vaccines were created, I think, in November of 20 and early 2021, and so people can judge for themselves how long a drug needs to be out in the public if they feel secure about it.
Thank you, sir.
Jim from Tallahatchie, Mr. Reynolds.
Gentlemen, are you aware that there's been some talk about the National Guard? Are you aware that our First Army in America was that George Washington commanded basically was local militia equivalent to our National Guard. Are you aware of that?
No, sir.
Well, gentlemen, are you also aware that on February 5th, 1777, George Washington issued orders and let the Continental Congress know that the troops were going to have to be vaccinated for smallpox because that virus was going to be a devastating implement on the Continental Army. Are you aware of that?
No, sir.
Are you further aware that our southern colonies, of which one of my ancestors fought, were helped to defeat the Tories and the British because they had been vaccinated at the behest of the Army and President and Commander Washington, so that there is a precedent for vaccination in our National Guard and servicemen since 1777. Are you aware of that?
No, sir.
Gentlemen, are you
But
further?
we can continue to go through the history if we like, and I will keep saying, no, sir, that I don't.
Well, is it true that if we don't remember history, we're condemned to repeat it?
No, sir.
Well, perhaps not. Gentlemen, and I respect, I don't know who's the authors or anything, I'm just
It's the
presenting
gentleman
this
behind
today. Well, he's a good man. But what I'm saying, I can disagree with my brother, and do. But gentlemen, are you aware that, with the situation in the world today, our National Guard, at the drop of a hat, we may be in almost a hot war. It's going to be a hot, cold war, and we may have to have hundreds of thousands of troops in Europe, and our National Guard may be federalized, and they may need to be ready to go. Do we really need to put any impediment in their path that could make them available to answer the call of our country to defend freedom in Eastern Europe or wherever they need to call to defend it?
Well, Jim, I would just say that we're very proud of our National Guard down in southwest Mississippi, so I can assure you that we're not going to pass legislation that will put them in harm. Thank you.
Gentleman from Warren, Mr. Denton.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Gentleman, will you yield?
Yes, sir.
Is it not true that the state of Mississippi ranks somewhere, I think, 1 or 2 for vaccination rate in the state? That's one thing that we're good at. Is that not true?
We do have a high vaccine rate over the years, yes, sir, with dealing with our children's vaccines and other vaccines, yes, sir.
So what's the purpose of vaccination in any way? What's the purpose of it? What's the purpose of vaccine?
Gentlemen, I guess that's an eye of the beholder, but you can get a vaccine.
No, it's not an eye of the beholder. I mean, that's beauty. Beauty is in the eye of the beholder. So what is the purpose of a vaccine?
Well, gentlemen, I guess I'm not looking at the ideal definition, but one definition may be to get vaccinated in hope that you don't get that disease that you're getting vaccinated from.
No, that's you telling me what the person is hoping for. I mean,
gentlemen, maybe the gentleman from Tallahatchie, since he knows a lot about this history, maybe he will tell you what the definition of vaccine is.
If the person from Tallahatchie was behind that well, I'd be asking him this question. But you're standing there. So I'm asking you. You're standing there. So either you know or you don't know. Either you can say, I don't know, gentlemen, or I'll find out, gentlemen, at another time.
Well,
but don't tell me somebody else can give me a definition when you're standing there.
Well, gentlemen, I will be happy to Google the official definition of vaccination.
Just say that to me. You'll be happy to
Google it right now.
Okay, questions and answers. Questions and answers.
But the
Gentleman from
definition
Warren,
of
you're
vaccine
ready.
is not in this legislation.
So, what is the purpose of this legislation?
Well,
okay, I want everybody to listen.
I've answered it 4 or 5 times, and I will be happy to answer it again.
I want everybody to listen. This is the last time this question will be asked. It's about the 4th time it's been asked. We will not ask this question again. You recognize, gentleman from Pike.
Thank you, gentlemen. For the third or fourth, fifth time, on line 24, and we going forward, it says a state agency, public official, state institution of higher learning, public community or junior college, county, municipality, or other political subdivision shall not refuse, withhold, or deny person services, shall not refuse employment to a person, or refuse to serve someone who chooses not to get vaccinated. And number two, on line 69, it says an employee of any public or private employer who has a sincerely held religious objection to receiving a vaccine for COVID-19 shall not be required to receive a vaccine for COVID-19. That's what it does.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Another question. Would you say that everybody that works at a local government or state government have rights and privileges?
Yes, I believe we all have rights.
And privileges and liberties. So a person that's been vaccinated, what kind of right do they have?
Well, Jim, I'm not sure what type of
what I'm saying is this,
question that is. And
that's
so
not a
you're asking
hypothetical.
what kind of right does somebody have that gets vaccinated?
I mean, shouldn't I have the same liberties if I'm vaccinated as a person you're telling me that's unvaccinated that could infect me and possibly kill me? Shouldn't I have the same right?
Gentlemen, I've told you exactly what this bill does, and so I think at this point, it's time for us to decide if we're for this legislation or not for this legislation. And so, Mr. Speaker, I think we have had a good discussion about this, what this legislation does, and I think it's time for us to vote and give the people of Mississippi a chance. Thank you.
All right, gentleman yields the podium. Question now recurs on House Bill 1509. Open the machine, Madam Clerk. If you favor the bill, vote aye. If you're opposed, vote nay. Has everyone voted? Has everyone voted? Close the machine, Madam Clerk. By a vote of 74 yeas, 41 nays, the bill passes. Announcements, Mr. Clerk. Announcements, Madam Clerk.
Accountability, efficiency, and transparency will meet after adjournment today in room 103. Conservation will meet 10 minutes after adjournment in 113. Ways and Means General Bills Subcommittee will meet 15 minutes after adjournment in 201H. Judiciary A will meet 40 minutes after adjournment in room 113, and Insurance will meet after adjournment in 402.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Ladies and gentlemen, I apologize. Chairman of Local and Private indicated to me that he had an item that was time sensitive. I promised him we could take it up today, so I'm going to recognize Chairman of Local and Private.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to go to item number 1, House Bill 1440. Make the usual motion.
The gentleman calls the bill up, moves the rules be suspended, bill considered in gross read the third time, placed on final passage. All in favor say aye, opposed nay. Ayes have it. Gentleman's recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. House Bill 1440 is a bill from Adams County and the city of Natchez. Their economic development group there is a 501c3 that the city and the county support for operations. They do this every year and have done it for many years. The bill did not come to us last year. It had repealed. So they're coming early trying to get this done so that they can continue supporting their economic development effort there. What this does, it allows the city of Natchez, in their discretion, to contribute an amount not less than $100,000, and the Adams County to contribute an amount not less than $165,000. This is for the operation of their economic development group. There's other monies that come in and pass through the county. That's the reason it's a not less than rather than a not more than. And but this is a long-term commitment by the city and the county. It does have a 4-year repealer, and it will come back to us in 4 years. And the act will take force immediately after passage. That's an explanation of the bill.
Questions? Gentleman from Marshall, Mr. Faulkner. He passes. I don't see any. Jim from Washington, he's not even there. All right, open the machine, Madam Clerk. Question occurs on House Bill 1440. If you favor the bill, vote aye. If you're opposed, vote nay. Has everyone voted? Has everyone voted? Close the machine, Madam Clerk. By vote 109 yeas, 5 nays, the bill passes.
Mr. Speaker, I'd like to ask for immediate release.
Any objection? Hearing none, we will do that.
Thank you.
All right, announcements by the members. Gentleman Marshall, Mr. Falk.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. If I could, I'd like to hold the last bill, House Bill 1509, on the motion to be considered.
Okay, we can do that. Gentleman from Lawrence, Mr. Evans.
Thank you, Speaker. I'd like to hold House Bill number 604, that's General Calendar, item number 58 today.
Okay, we can do that. Gentleman from Walthall, Mr. Pygott.
Adjourn in memory, Mr.
Yes,
Speaker.
sir.
Mr. Speaker, in the House, I'd like the House to join me in adjourning in the passing of Ms. Virgie Chapman McCormick, the mother of Mississippi Farm Bureau President Mike McCormick.
Thank you, sir. Jim from Bolivar, Mr. Sanders.
Yeah, I did. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I asked this afternoon that we would keep our very own Assistant Sergeant at Arms Melvin Gibbs and adjourn in memory of his mother-in-law and his wife.
Okay, thank you, sir. I appreciate that. Was not aware of that. Any other announcements? Madam Clerk says she has another announcement.
Insurance will not meet today.
All right, anything further? I don't see any. Recognize the gentleman from Hancock, Mr. Anderson, for the motion.
What do you want me to tell?
I want a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn, 9 o'clock tomorrow morning.
Very good, sir. All those in favor say aye. Opposed, nay. The ayes have it. House adjourned till 9 a.m. tomorrow.